One of the questions I get frequently asked from students is, does my tool need sharpened? 9 times out of 10, the answer is yes, it needs sharpened, and we need to sharpen quite frequently. And oftentimes when you're having any kind of an issue getting a clean cut, that's one of the first places you want to look at is the tool sharpened, and then is it sharpened properly? Let's talk about the equipment that I use to sharpen with. Let's start with the grinder. I prefer an 8-inch grinder over a 6, mainly because it's easier to source wheels and it has additional weight to it. Beyond that, all I really care about is that my grinder runs my wheels smooth and vibration free. If you've got a lot of vibration coming from your grinding system, that will translate into a poorly ground tool. So what we've got here is an 8-inch grinder, slow speed, 1725 RPM, as opposed to a high speed at 3400 RPM. The wheels are more important than the grinder or the speed. I'm going to move the guards out of the place, and we'll keep them out of place while we're doing this demo on here also. But the wheels that typically come on your grinder are dark gray in color. Those are really good for one thing as a wood turner in my shop, and that's garbage can ballast. The cheapest wheels that you'll typically find are white, which are aluminum oxide. Those white wheels, or they'll come in a ruby color, they're a monocrystalline structure, and so when they say that they're an 80 grit structure, they're probably an 80 grit when you finish dressing them. The wheel that we've got on this grinder is a Norton 3X. This is a ceramic aluminum wheel. They run cooler, cut better than the aluminum oxide wheels, and far better than the carborundum wheels that come on your grinders. So that's an upgrade on there, and well worth a few extra dollars. The next upgrade into cubic boron nitrate, CBN wheels. These are a bit more expensive, but they give you roughly the life of 5 or 6 of your stone wheels. So they, in the long run, they're far better and far more economical. They run cooler again than the stone wheels, even the premium stone wheels. They run cooler, and I can get them in much finer grits. That means I can get much sharper edges. When I'm doing small diameter work, my spindle work, I like a 180 or finer grit wheel. When I'm doing large diameter work, like roughing out large bowl blanks, 12 inches and larger, I'll drop back to a 80 or a 180 CBN wheel for that work. I keep the ceramic aluminum wheels around because I can get much coarser grits. I run a 46 on one side of my grinder, and that gives me a very coarse edge to rough shape a tool very, very quickly. The next thing we want to look at, once we've got our grinder, decided on wheels, are jigs. Here we've got the Oneway Wolverine system. It comes with a base unit for each side, comes with a platform, a V-arm, and then you want to pick up the optional Vari-Grind accessory. We'll explain how all of those work as we go through this demo. When you're mounting a new wheel, something that's important to talk about, especially a stone wheel, is these don't always run true, and they can be broke in transit. So the first thing you want to do when you're talking about mounting a new wheel is I remove the plastic bushings. There's a set of 3 for different size arbors. I replace those with an R3X machined bushing. That gives me a good purchase out here on the side and sets this so that it runs good and true. A lot less vibration problems that way. When we're talking about buying a wheel, I want to look for this code right here. This is 3X80-K. 3X is the manufacturer's designation for the wheel. 80 is the grit. The -K tells me about how hard or how soft the wheel is. We're dealing with tool steels as wood turners that are in the medium range of hardness of tool steel. So we want a grinding wheel that's in the medium range of hardness so that it cuts properly. It's an alphabetical scale, goes from A to Z. A being the softest, Z being the hardest. So when you buy inexpensive white wheels out of aluminum oxide, they're typically very hard. If they've got a coat on them, it'll be an N or an M. If there's no coat, it's usually because they're very, very hard. It's a lot easier to make a hard wheel than one that breaks down at a consistent rate, or a frayable wheel. And so that is the frayability, is that K. The next test we want to do, once we've decided on the wheel, but before we mount this on the grinder, is a ring test. Take any tool that you've got and just give that just a little flick with your finger, and you hear a little ring. If it's a thud, you have a cracked wheel. Do not mount a cracked wheel onto your grinder. They can explode as they wind up to speed. So this is very important, that anytime you put a stone wheel on the grinder, that you ring test it. CBN wheels don't have any problems with needing an extra hub or anything like that running true. You're not going to crack a solid metal hub, so you don't have to ring a CBN wheel. They come out to be much safer in the long run, along with running cooler. If you bump your hand or your arm into a stone wheel, they can cut you quite severely. They grab you. If you bump into the CBN wheels, you're much less likely to get caught up in a CBN wheel. The worst injuries I've seen in 15 years in the classroom, all 3 of them have came from a grinder, as people have stuck their hands in. One of the key things, or touched them as they're running, and 2 of those did literally reach out and grab the wheel to see if it was running. Don't use your fingers as brakes, please. As you can see with a CBN wheel, I don't have an enlarged hub. It is machined to fit my grinder. So that causes a lot less problems with wobble. This one is machined with a steel hub. Some are machined with aluminum hubs. They both work fine. Steel is a better cooling agent or heat sink than aluminum tends to be. And if you ever slip off of the tool, off of the jig and catch, and I'll explain that later, the steel hubs are a little bit more durable that way. We have the cubic boron nitrate abrasive here on the face of the wheel. Some have them on the sides. That can be handy for some of your carbide cutters. The CBN is only to be used with high-speed steel or hardened tool steels. Never, ever grind soft steel with your cubic boron nitrate wheels. Your jigs are made out of soft steel, so don't let your jigs touch your grinding wheels. What happens is it either buries the metal that it's removed into the surface, or it will actually lift the CBN abrasive right off of the wheel. Either way, it does permanent damage, and they can't be restored once you've done that. Other than that, you'll get a much longer life out of your CBN wheels, and they're a lot safer if you bump into them. Okay, we're going to start with the first tool that we used in this series, and that will be our spindle roughing gouge. One handy tip for any of your tools is to take a marker and color off the bevel. That way you know once you've ground off the ink, you know you've got your jig set where you want to be. Now, anybody that's seen the packaging for the Wolverine sharpening jig has seen a picture of a spindle roughing gouge cradled in the V-arm, just like that. And picture is worth 1,000 words. That's obvious as to how that ought to be sharpened. But there are some drawbacks there. Once I lock that in place, you see there's quite a bit of movement. Now that I've got it set, there is no fine adjustment. So if I'm not right on my bevel, as I turn my wheel by hand, and turn the opposite wheel by hand, that way you don't run your thumb into a cutting edge. When I look and I see how much ink has been removed, then I know I need to adjust it. I need to adjust this going in a little bit. As I lock that arm, there's movement again. That little bit, I moved that, went clear to the other side. I've got to come out just a little bit. I can hear a difference in there. That actually sounds like it's getting better. And there I'm grinding all the way down that bevel. So that is matched up now. I could turn that on and grind it. Now I've got all the weight of the tool plus my hands, the same pressure I'll be putting on there, working against that grinding wheel. Its purpose in life is to make that steel shorter. Once the steel gets shorter, the wheel gets smaller. I've got to reset this each and every time. I've got to go through that same struggle. So it's not the easiest way to set this up. And as I come over to the side, grind over to the side of the tool, it has a tendency to roll the edge over. One of my beliefs in sharpening is your number one enemy in sharpening any turning tool is the handle of the tool. And so if I can avoid using the handle to sharpen the tool, I will. Now when I say avoid using the handle, it's this part. I don't want to use the handle to sharpen the tool. Rather than using the V-arm, we're going to move over and use the platform. The platform's much easier to set up and can be set up rather than just using the marker and test on there. I can get a setup tool for that. The Raptor Set-Up jigs are very handy. I'm going to use my 35-degree Raptor. I put the long edge down onto the platform, and then I'm going to size the wheel to the two parts of the bird's mouth. Once that's set, I lock everything up secure. Having the long side and the two parts of the bird's mouth touching the wheel, I've set the platform in exactly the same place each and every time. While I may be just slightly off of 35 degrees exact, I'm not so concerned that I'm exactly reading 35 on a protractor. I'm more concerned that each and every time I put my tool onto the jig, I'm at the same setting. The wood doesn't really know if I'm at 35 or 36. And then as we do some of the other tools, we'll use other Raptors for setting those up. There's a full series of Raptors available. Now that I'm ready to turn the grinder on, again, I've removed the guards so that you can see what's going on here today. You probably want to have those down between your eyes and the wheel. Metal shavings in your eye is not fun. And the abrasive stones are even worse. So always remember, put on your personal protective equipment. I'm going to have my safety glasses on. As I sharpen this tool, I mentioned my handle's my number one enemy. So I don't hold on to the back of the handle. I'm going to come up to the front of the handle. Bring my grinder up to speed. My left thumb is going to hold the tool flat on the rest, and my right hand controls it. Same thing as how I use the tool when I'm turning. And I'm just going to bring that around, and my right thumb comes into the tool, into the flute of the tool, and it finds that flat spot. I do not want to roll that tool any further than where that flat spot is. I don't want to soften that edge up. My corners on mine are clipped back just a little bit to keep a nice clean cutting edge so that I can cut right up to the corners, for instance, in a pummel. And if you look, single pass, I removed all that ink from before. Much easier to set up using the Raptor and get that repeatable than it is to use the V-arm. So on my spindle roughing gouge, I want that edge ground square across. I do not pull the wings back on this tool. I'm not trying to get something that'll take off big wide shavings. This is more than aggressive enough if I need to, and will still take a very fine, delicate cut. Our next tool is our parting tool. And I mentioned on my parting tool, when I used it, I've got two different bevels. I've got a long bevel and a short bevel. I don't worry about setting a platform up at all for this. I just come up, anchor, find my bevel, grind one surface, got a little bit more to grind. And do the next surface. What I want to make sure of is that I've got the cutting edge running down this rib on both sides. The long bevel is ground first and then the short bevel. That way it puts a burr up on this top surface. And I know when I pick the tool up, which edge I want up on top and which edge I want on my tool rest. The next tool we used was our skew. There is not a Raptor for the skew. And the reason there's not is it's a much sharper angle, and when you change the diameter of your wheels, you lose control of which bevel angle or of the bevel angle that you've got because the radius changes so much at these sharper angles. So we are going to use the platform and we'll use the marker. You bring that base in just a little bit. Find my anchor on my rest. Find my bevel. Turn the opposite wheel by hand. You don't want your thumb coming down into that cutting edge. You can slice your finger to the bone with a dull turning tool. As I look at that, I'm cutting down most of that ink. This has a slight curve on this tool, so I don't expect to get all of the ink. As I sharpen my skew, my left hand acts as a fulcrum with my left thumb, and I just rock that tool. I do not bring that tool all the way down to where it's parallel to the wheel. That'll round this edge over. I don't want that. I want to be just up to that skew angle. So I stop right there at that skew angle, 10 to 12 degrees or so. Now it's also interesting to note with this skew and the way this grinder and this platform's set up, that as I swing this around, right there I'm catching the corner of my platform. And I'm in all the way tight. This skew is still got an awful lot of life left in it. Oneway makes a mini platform, which will get me a lot closer and let me continue to use this skew for a lot more years. The next tool we'll talk about is our skew that wasn't ground with a radius on the tip. This is straight across. To grind this style skew, I come up and I move across the face of the wheel without rocking the tool. My left thumb holds the tool down onto the rest. You don't want to go to all this trouble, set the rest up, have your hand back on the handle, and lift that tool off the platform. Keep it anchored down flat on that platform. The next tool that we used was our box scraper. Now my box scraper has got a clearance angle and then about an 80-degree nose angle. The clearance angle is just ground at any angle sharper than the nose angle. I'm going to hold the tool flat on the rest and stop just short of coming around parallel, just like we did on the skew. I want that on a radiused surface, a radiused edge. And then the clearance angle there, I don't care what angle that is, and I'll even grind that sideways in order to get material off even quicker. I don't even bother to set up a jig. While we're on the topic of scrapers, that'll raise a little burr up over the top of this. And you can run your thumb over it and you can feel that burr. Run your thumb about 10 or 12 times on there and you'll feel that burr come right off of there. Burrs are very short-lived animals. So when you're using a scraper for a finished cut, you want to work very quickly with that, or sharpen quite often would be a better way of putting that. Every pass or two, you typically want to raise your burr back up. Now, this being a box scraper, it should be said it's mostly going into end grain, which is the hardest way to cut the wood and can be the most aggressive. The harder and denser the wood, the smaller the burr I want up here. The softer the wood, the bigger the burr. So if I'm doing a box out of an exotic wood, I may even go in and take my a fine grit stone, this one's 300, and hone that. But I always remove that burr off the top first. My bowl scrapers are the same thing. I remove the burr. Now these I do sharpen at a 60-degree nose angle or less. And I do have a 60-degree Raptor. So again, the long point on the flat point on the Raptor, the two parts on the bird's beak for setting up the platform. If I'm dealing in a softer hardwood like what we've got available, oftentimes I'll go to my stone wheels to raise a bigger burr. My box elders, my soft maples. My harder, denser timbers, I'll be over on my CBNs. The next scraper let's talk about is our negative rake scrapers. Negative rake scrapers are going to be less aggressive than your traditional scrapers, which I just showed you. These are ground top and bottom. However, I use the same bevel angle for both surfaces. I use the 35-degree angle on both of them. I have friends that use a 33-degree angle. Why? They've got a gauge that checks a 33-degree angle. I've got a gauge that sets a 35. This is the top of the tool. This one's shaped for the end of a goblet or a scoop. And I'm going to come in and sharpen the top. First, and then turn the tool over and sharpen the bottom. Now, as quick as the bevel wore off of the traditional scraper, it wears off of a negative rake 3 to 4 times faster. So if your best cut is only going to last for maybe 10 seconds with a negative rake scraper. You've got maybe 30 seconds with a traditional scraper. Our next tools are going to be our bowl and spindle gouges. So to set up for those, I'm going to remove the platform. Set it to the side, take my V-arm, and trade places. I'm going to set my V-arm with my 50-degree Raptor. using my bowl gouge. Now, the reason I use a 50 on my bowl gouge is it cuts everything that I need it to cut. It can cut from the inside, on the inside of the bowl, it can cut from the rim to the bottom. On the outside of the bowl, it can cut from the bottom to the rim. And it can do it with the tailstock in place for most of the cuts. So to me, I find it one of the most versatile angles for all the cuts that I need. I also find it one of the most durable angles. And when you're turning bowls, you see a lot of surface wood or a lot of surface area coming past your cutting edge. So I want a good durable cutting edge. So I'm going to drop the claw of the Raptor into the pocket and then match the two parts of the bird's mouth up to the wheel. Securely lock the jig. I'm going to take my V-arm and my bowl gouge. I'm going to bring my tool and put it into the Vari-Grind like this. I've got the leg towards the rear. I've got two different Raptor protrusion jigs here. The 2.5 inch sets my clearance angle on my tool, and my 2 inch sets my primary angle. I only have to use the 2.5 inch when I want to do the clearance. Most often I come right to the 2 inch. I can then place the Vari-Grind in the pocket. One of the things you want to be aware of is that this stays back. If you've got a tool with a heavy handle, especially some of the modular handles, it wants to push you out of that pocket. So keep it back into that pocket. I keep my right hand right up on the tool and the Vari-Grind. My left hand comes underneath and supports. One of the most dangerous things that you can do is to have your hand over the top of this. What makes it dangerous is if you fall off of the wheel, your hand then can get caught into the wheel. So support it from underneath. You're going to do one wing. Keep that moving all the time. Do the second wing. And then blend the nose of the tool to the two wings. Practice that motion a few times with the grinder off so that you know your hands are in a nice safe position. Before you bring the grinder up to speed, do one wing, come off the wheel, do the second wing, and then blend the tip of the tool to the wing. I like to take and look at this surface here, and I want to see a nice smooth arc coming up over the tool and down through there. If I've got a low spot somewhere in this area or a straight edge, either of those conditions could be a problem. Here's a drawing of showing the little hook jaw or the hook that the tool can get in there. Now that can be caused from a couple of things. One is flute design, but oftentimes it's caused from just spending too much time on the side of that tool right at that tip, and that brings that curve around and not blending that nose. So you want to watch for that you don't generate that condition. A good properly sharpened tool will look much like this. A nice curve across the top. I've got my primary bevel here, my clearance bevel here, and you can see about where the center line or the bottom of the flute is traveling through there. Nice curve on that top. That's important. I don't want that getting straight or concave in there. I want a nice curve across the top. Curved edges slice cleaner than straight edges. All right, the control arm here on our Vari-Grind is set just under this second notch. And that's an important setting. What this setting does is it changes the angle that I've got here on the wing. If I move this leg forward, what it does is it changes my wing angle and it makes it really, really straight. And that really straight-sided wing can be very dangerous. The 3/8 bowl gouge on the bottom is ground with the control leg forward. And you can see that the wing is much longer and sharper coming up to the cutting edge than the gouge on top. I don't want that long, thin, sharp edge on my gouges. This long, thin edge is used by some turners for a shear scrape, but it's not good when I go to do a push cut. I want the versatility of a tool that will do both. And so I bring that control leg up to that second notch. As we set this control leg, I want to have just under that second notch, and there's just enough room I can grab that with a fingernail or see a little daylight going through there. With this control leg set at the second notch, I get the side reinforcement that I want on my cutting edge, gives me a more durable edge, and is less prone to catches than one where the control leg is thrown forward. The next tool let's talk about is our spindle gouge. My spindle gouge goes back into the Vari-Grind and uses the 2-inch protrusion, just like the bowl gouge. Going to set my 2-inch protrusion. I'm going to use my 45-degree Raptor to set my V-arm. Claw in the pocket, then the 2 parts of the bird's mouth against the wheel. I'm going to come into the pocket of my V-arm, my left hand underneath, my right hand over the top. Just like on my bowl gouge, I'm going to sharpen my left wing, then come off to the stone, do my right wing, and then blend the two together. Now I want that left hand underneath for support. I'm not afraid of the sparks coming by there. As you watch, there won't be any real sparks. I'm more concerned about dropping this jig off the tool off the face, and this jig and the tool hitting into my wheel. That can do significant damage to your wheel. It can bend your jig. It can even bugger up your grinder. I've seen the shafts bent on some of the grinder motors. But if your hand's over the top of that, you can replace all this equipment for less than you can go to the emergency room. So keep your hands protected. We'll bring the grinder up to speed. One wing, then the other wing, and blend the tip to the 2 wings. Now you notice when I did that with the grinder off, I said start with the left, then go to the right. With the grinder on, I went right to left. It doesn't matter if you go right to left or left to right, but do them in separate motions. Don't try and do it all in one sweep. You won't get the shape that you want. Again, I want to look for that curve across the top and across the back. My 3/8 gouge is sharpened just like my 1/2-inch gouge in my spindle gouges, and so is my 3/8 bowl gouge sharpened just like my 1/2-inch bowl gouge. The one bowl gouge we haven't talked about is our traditional ground bowl gouge. On our traditional or our bottoming gouge, I don't use a platform. You could, if that's your choice. I'm not going to set up the platform. I just use my left hand resting on the jig clamp to set this. Now the reason I don't use the Vari-Grind to grind this either is the Vari-Grind will pull the wings back. This tool is ground with the wings straight across, just like your spindle roughing gouge. Every bowl that I do is a little bit different. I want this bevel angle to be as sharp as I can and cut from the rim to the base of the bowl without hitting the rim. If I'm too sharp here, I'm going to hit the rim. If I'm too blunt, then I have to push across the face. So it's a happy compromise. But I want the tool as sharp as I possibly can without hitting the edge. I'm probably somewhere around a 50-degree on the bevel angle, and that would be a good place to start with if you want to set up a platform. To sharpen this, I bring my grinder up to speed. I use my hand as a rest, and then I come in, find the bevel on the tool, bring it up to where I get my cutting edge, and then sweep the tool around. And then it's got a rather long, sharp clearance angle. The advantage of that long clearance angle is it's got material out of the way. It makes it very easy for me to lift or drop the handle and change the bevel angle on that short bevel that I've got. Also on that finish cut, I want that short bevel so that I have less compressed fiber and I have fewer compression rings in the bowl that I would need to sand out later. One of the things we need to consider is dressing our wheels. You can see on this wheel it's starting to get a little color, a little black color. That's steel that just came off of tools earlier. You may also get a pit. If you're sharpening tool and you feel a bounce because you've got a pit or a low spot, these have got hard and soft spots in them occasionally, and so you'll get a little bit of a bounce. When you're getting, anytime you're getting a bounce, you need to come in and dress the wheel. Now there's a couple of types of dressers out there. The old star wheels, these will abrade the wheel and do a very good job of getting you back to the coarsest grit possible on your grinder, but they will not shape the wheel. The diamond impregnated diamond dressers are by far the best way to do this. There are some that are diamond plated rather than diamond impregnated. I'd spend a few extra dollars, get a diamond impregnated one. This goes down probably close to 1/4 of an inch. It's got diamond impregnated into the dresser. Most of us will never wear one of these out. You will, however, wear out 2 or 3 of those diamond plated ones. I'll bring the grinder up to speed. I've got my jig, my platform set up. It's nice and secure. I don't care about the angle. I'm going to set the angle with my diamond dresser and just having it come in close. See, it doesn't take a lot of pressure to get that to work. I'm starting to get dust. Now I'm sweeping back and forth and I'm trying to put a slight dome on my wheel. I like that little bit of dome. Then when I work in the center of the wheel and I wear it down to a flat spot, I can work the edges. Once I started doing that, rather than truing the wheel off flat, I started doubling the life of my stone wheels. If you want a dead flat wheel, I'll show you how to do that. Come in with your dresser, lock in. I can use the end of my platform as a rest, just secure, and then pressure down and come across and back. A few passes like that, and then take care of that really quick. You can start to see the dust kicking up here. This is very harmful dust. Wear your personal protection. You really don't want this to get down into your lungs. This is an abrasive. So it's not like the wood fibers, which are bad. This is worse. Now that I've got my stone dressed up, this is one of the examples on why I keep a coarse stone. I'm going to take this bowl gouge, and the wing's getting rather long on it for me, and the wing angle is wrong, so I want to reset this. In order to do that, I'm going to what's called profile the gouge. So I'm going to take with the flute and point the flute towards the wheel. And I rock the tool in order to get the curve that I want. I've got metal where I've dulled that up. You can see the reflection. I'm going to hand grind some of that surface away. You could go ahead and set your jig up. Once I've got the bulk of that out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and stop my wheel. It's a bowl gouge, 50-degree Raptor. Set the claw in, set it up. My Vari-Grind, 2 inches. Bring my grinder back up to speed. and I profile the tool. I no longer can see a reflection on the cutting edge. If you can see a reflection on your cutting edge, you don't have a cutting edge. A good cutting edge will not reflect light. I've got clearance angles still here on this. That doesn't bother me. That's ready to go to the finer grit wheel and then go to the piece I'm turning. In order to dress my CBN wheels, and these do load up occasionally, it doesn't have to be dressed as often as my stone wheels do, and absolutely under no circumstances take your diamond wheel dresser or your star wheel dresser to your CBN wheels. Either of those two options will ruin your CBN wheel. Use a soft CBN dresser, and that just slides across the front. A couple of passes is all it takes. It does wear your dresser down, but it also, what that does is it cleans out between the grit particles. It cleans out the wheel and allows you to cut better all the way across. So once you're practicing frequently, you'll find that the most difficult tool to sharpen will be your bowl gouge. Practice it with the grinder off, get your hand position right, and then practice it with the grinder on. Once you're comfortable with this, you'll be comfortable sharpening everything. So now we've learned to sharpen our tools. Practice this frequently. The sharper your tools, the cleaner your cut, the less sandpaper you'll buy. It's much cheaper to sharpen the tool than it is to buy the sandpaper to tear out or to clean up torn out grain. So I'll go to the grinder and make another cut if that's what it takes, just to avoid a little sanding. Practice this frequently, and you'll notice with the setup of the jigs, the Raptors, the Wolverines, and the combination of everything, it doesn't take me long at all to change from one setting to the next and get consistency out of the system. And therefore, that also helps me cut cleaner because I'm used to the way my tools cut and the sharp edges on them.